Hey, what's up guys? So AntiLaser has released an updated version of the CPU for the ALP. It's the new Hardware 6 CPU, which replaces the previous Hardware 4 CPU. And in this video, I want to go over what all the improvements are. In fact, I want to go over this in 3 parts. In the first part of the video, we're going to go over what the specific improvements are here with this new CPU. In the second part of the video, we're going to go over if you want to upgrade, whether or not it's worth it, if you've got Hardware 4, for example, as well as how you go about the upgrade and kind of what parts need to be replaced. And then finally for part 3, I want to go over what my thoughts are here with this latest upgrade, as well as maybe some things that I wish were included that were not. And so with that said, let's go ahead and dive into the new ALP Hardware 6 CPU. Now to start things off here, as far as these specific improvements here with Hardware 6, it's basically some internal changes here, kind of like faster processors and whatnot. And over on the Radar Detector forum, Best Radar Detectors, who's the US distributor for ALP, has a nice overview as far as all the different changes. And I'm going to link to this article for you guys down in the description. And the main improvement that he talks about is the fact that it's now got an advanced digital signal processor, basically a better DSP chip. They've doubled the frequency, now up to 200 megahertz, which should be helpful for both reducing false alerts and giving you more accurate signal filtering. It's also got more memory now. As far as the RAM, it's now up to 64 kilobytes of RAM. And then as far as the flash memory, it now has 512 kilobytes. That's 4 times as much memory as before, which should help with some more sophisticated programming code for better signal processing and some additional advanced features. And then in terms of reliability, there's going to be some improvements here too. There's improved self-test functionality to let you know in case some of the components stop working. They've upgraded the hardware to reduce the risk of physical malfunctions and thus improve the durability and reliability of the system. And then they've also made some software optimizations that I mentioned before, which should help with both signal detection and response to give you fewer false alerts and improved signal effectiveness. So basically things like a faster processor, additional memory, and improved reliability. Now there's also been some upgrades to the heads over the years. For example, some of the newest generation of the regular heads are actually more sensitive than the older generations of the heads. And the newest versions of the regular heads, you can tell the difference by checking the serial number. The serial numbers will actually start with the number 9 if it's the latest and greatest versions of the regular heads. And ALP does recommend that if you're going to be using Hardware 6 that you also have the upgraded heads because they can't guarantee that the performance is going to be as good as it could be if you're using the less sensitive older versions of the heads. Additionally, when it comes to the TX heads, the Hardware 6 CPU is just designed to work with the TX Black heads, not the older blue and green ones. And if you take a look at Hardware 4 and Hardware 6, the CPUs actually look very similar. They're still going to be black. The colored sticker will actually change. The logo was black on the Hardware 4 CPU and it's silver on Hardware 6. And if you've got a Hardware 6 CPU, it'll also specify Hardware 6 both on the box for the CPU as well as on the label of the CPU itself. Now, when it comes to improved performance with this upgraded CPU, currently the performance of Hardware 6 is actually going to be on par with what we've got with Hardware 4. And so for that reason, if you've got a Hardware 4 CPU, there's not a huge compelling reason to run out and go upgrade immediately. Now the Hardware 6 CPU should be more reliable and has additional self-test capabilities, which is nice in case of failures and whatnot. And then the faster processor and additional memory should allow them to add some additional features down the line and further improve the laser jamming algorithm, but they're also going to continue to support Hardware 4 as well. Now, as far as these new Hardware 6 CPUs, they're already shipping. They've actually started shipping as of June 22nd. Now, that said, if you'd like to upgrade from Hardware 4 to Hardware 6, it's a pretty straightforward upgrade. You can just pop out the old CPU and just plug the new one in its place, which is very nice. And on ALP's website, they've got the option for you to upgrade your older CPU, whether it's Hardware 2 or Hardware 4, to Hardware 6. And then as far as the heads themselves, again, you're going to want to use some of the newest generation regular heads and a TX Black head. And if you're curious about which version of the regular heads that you have, on the upgrade page for the Hardware 6 CPU, it actually says that these Hardware 6 CPUs are designed for current sensors that have been sold since 2020. BRD has mentioned that the older sensors may report the same since they don't have the same internal version reporting, but they don't have the same sensitivity as the newer heads. And so mixing older and newer sensors will cause issues. And so even if the older sensor looks like it works, it's not going to offer the correct performance because the Hardware 6 CPU is designed for the current generation of sensors. And thus it's not going to adjust for the older sensors. And then as mentioned earlier, it's not even going to recognize the older TX blue or green sensors, just the TX black ones. And so if you need to upgrade the heads, you can just purchase new ones online. The cables and everything are all still the same, unless you have a really old CPU that had the old push connectors. Otherwise, the latest ones that have the twist locks, you should be able to use the new heads with your older cables, which is very nice. Cool. So now that we've got all that out of the way, we've gone over what the improvements are, if it's worth upgrading, and if you choose to do so, how you actually go about the upgrade. Now that we've gone over all that, I want to go over my thoughts here for the CPU and for this upgrade, I guess with AntiLaser as a whole. And this is the part where I guess I'm going to go on a bit of a rant. Now, before I do that, let me say right up front that I definitely appreciate that they're focusing on, laser jamming itself. That's always going to be the priority here when it comes to laser jamming, Who cares about all the other features and whatnot if the jamming itself stinks, right? So I'm glad to see that they're continuing to work on this kind of stuff. That said, we've been seeing some issues that I talked about in my latest test results where we're getting more and more punch-throughs. This affects both hardware 4 and hardware 6. I talked a little bit about it in the video, but to go into maybe a little bit more clarity as far as what it seems to be is causing those issues, ALP is working on dealing with reflections. This affects pretty much every laser jammer where it can fire back pulses, right? And you can see reflections out there that could bounce back. And the laser jammer needs to be able to make sure that it's jamming the laser gun and not getting confused by any reflections of stuff around you, right? So they're working on that. And they're also going to be adjusting the laser jamming algorithm to avoid jam codes on the Dragon Eyes. If they're actually adjusting kind of the way the algorithm works to avoid the jam codes, that can also affect the jamming capability as well if they're going maybe less aggressive with the jamming itself. And that seems to be a big part of why we've seen it was doing a really good job jamming in the past, but then with newer firmwares, as they're adjusting things, well, it's not jamming quite as well anymore. Now, if you take a look, there is an option for adjusting how it jams the different stalker guns. It has the ability to set it to max, which is basically full jamming capability, or you can set it to optimal, which is going to basically reduce some of the jamming to also reduce some of the jam codes on the guns at the expense of some potential punch-throughs. And if they're actually working on this kind of stuff, similarly for the Dragon Eyes, I would love to see an option available here for the CPUs to give us the option to either go for full jamming or to maybe back things off a little bit to avoid some of those jam codes, again, at the risk of punch-throughs. This could apply both for hardware 4 and for hardware 6. It's not hardware 6 specifically, but I definitely wanted to cover that because that is something that they're working on, and hardware 6 with their faster DSP chip should give them improved signal analysis and just seeing what's going on to better deal with this kind of stuff as well in the future. Now, there's a lot of other stuff that I wish was included here in the CPU that was not included. Now, the ALP first launched well over a decade ago. The hardware 2 CPU, when that came out, that was released 11 years ago. Then we had the hardware 4 CPU, that came out 5 years ago, and the main improvement with hardware 4 was just some additional memory to give you some additional radar features, like the assisted radar filter, the ARF for the net radar DSP. It basically adds some additional K blocks essentially to sort of block certain ranges of K-band for BSMs and whatnot. So cool, a little bit more memory 6 years later to add that functionality. Now here we are in 2024 and we've got a little faster processor and a little bit more memory. We've got 64 kilobytes of RAM and then 512 kilobytes of memory. When we were reading over that, we're like, is that a typo? Did you mean megabytes or something? We're talking, here we are and we're half a megabyte of memory. That's something to be proud of in 2024. To be fair, we don't need a crazy ton of memory, but still, it just seems kind of silly looking at that at first glance, But there's also stuff that I think would really practically have made a really big improvement. For example, I mentioned the net radar DSP, their radar add-on. The UI stinks. Because I don't like it. The performance is great. It's based off the unit in R3, so performance is good, but the UI, it's kind of like an add-on to the ALP. And the same is true here if you want to use the Bluetooth module. That wasn't built into the CPU, and so you have to get this extra $130 Bluetooth module to plug into the ALP to get the Bluetooth capabilities. Now the issue is because all this stuff is kind of added on and external, you've got one port for the control pad to control the ALP, disable the jammers and stuff. That port is also shared with the external speaker for the hi-fi module, and it's shared with the Bluetooth module. And so you wind up having a lot of conflicts if you're trying to use everything at the same time. Some of the buttons won't work. If you use the Bluetooth and your speaker doesn't work. And so for that reason, I'm like, okay, well, if I want to use the Bluetooth functionality, at this point, I only use it for firmware upgrades and to change settings. Because if I'm connected over Bluetooth, well, then I'm probably going to get some audio latency issues of okay, is it actually going to play through my car stereo? It may or may not. Maybe there's some delays. I need to know immediately when I'm getting shot with laser. Additionally, sometimes what if you're on the phone? Is the audio actually going to play through your car stereo or not? And so I'm for reliability, I don't use any of the Bluetooth stuff. I just use the dedicated speaker. That way it always works, even if I'm on the phone or listening to music or whatever, and it's nice and loud. And it also avoids some of the issues of using the Bluetooth module conflicting with the control pad and not all the buttons, well, I guess both buttons, there's only two, both buttons working. Because again, you've got one port for the control pad, for the speaker, and for Bluetooth. This could have been pretty easily fixed if they just put Bluetooth in the CPU like everybody else is doing nowadays. Uniden has Bluetooth in the R9. TMG, it's the affordable option, right? That has Bluetooth built in. You've got Escort doing Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. ALP is still selling the Bluetooth as an external optional accessory. The external speaker, well, that's wired into the control pad with the hi-fi module. That could have easily been resolved by just putting like a headphone jack on the side of the CPU, again, like most companies are doing. So you just plug a speaker into the headphone jack and boom, now you're not also conflicting with Bluetooth and with the control pad. And this kind of stuff seems like a pretty obvious thing to do, right? There's been years of like opportunity for them to just like put Bluetooth inside the CPU, to put a headphone jack in there. I understand it would mean that people who already have the existing stuff, okay, it wouldn't necessarily be compatible, but like, I mean, as we're improving things, come on, it's been years. This stuff is pretty standard, right? And doing so would avoid a lot of the like annoying UI conflicts that you have when you're trying to do everything on one port because you've got all these different add-ons that you're trying to stick into the ALP. Now, is this being done out of laziness? I don't know. Is it being done to make extra money? If you want the hi-fi module for the speaker, it costs an extra $100 to add a speaker to the ALP. If you want to buy it afterwards, it costs $130. The Bluetooth module to get the phone compatibility, that's also another $130 to add to the ALP, which I do think is an important upgrade. But why not just put it into the CPU itself? Is it a laziness thing? Is it a making money thing? Is there something else altogether? But I'm like, it's 2024. Put Bluetooth in the CPU already, you know? So like a lot of this stuff could have easily been done with the newer CPU and done more than give it 512 kilobytes of memory, of like giving it a little faster DSP chip. You know, there's so much opportunity here that they really could have modernized the CPU. Like the competition is doing this kind of stuff. ALP isn't. ALP's got more sensitive heads. That's definitely nice, but what about maybe making the heads smaller? Look at what Escort's doing, for example, with their smaller heads. That's a really nice improvement. Stinger's going for the super teeny tiny heads. I would love to see ALP do something like that as well. Again, there's opportunities here, especially as they're releasing newer versions of their hardware. Now, what about the app for ALP if you're using it with Bluetooth? That has this weird convoluted setup of like, if you want to go in and change settings, then you have to like use the app to then go to a web page and change the settings in a web page and then go back into the app and like download the settings from the web page and push it to your ALP. Why not just be like every other piece of tech nowadays where just have like control switches to like turn stuff on and off and adjust the settings right in the app and just have it pushed directly into the ALP? Probably not a huge deal for a lot of people, I get it, but why not like improve that process? What if you're in an area you need to adjust settings at testing or something, or you're out of the country, you need to adjust the settings, you don't have like access to internet on your phone? Okay, now you can't change settings. Like, just open the app and it'll give us the ability to change settings directly. Or there's an issue that I ran into when I upgraded to the Hardware 6 CPU where I wasn't actually able to take the settings that I had in Hardware 4 and just push them directly to Hardware 6 because the settings are tied to the CPU. I would have loved to just, again, like have the settings and push them on over. Like, okay, well, I can go to the computer and load in all of my settings that way, but then when I go into the phone, it's not going to be able to read the settings on the CPU. It's just referencing this website. And for that reason, it's basically going to ignore all the settings that I built on the computer and copy to the ALP over USB, and I have to like start over from scratch again and redo all of my settings again. Why can't it just read the settings directly off of the ALP? You're communicating with the ALP. Why do I have to like go to this website? There's just all these weird things that are not necessarily deal breakers, but like they're stupid. I mean, I don't want to be mean, but like, this is dumb. Come on, you've had so much time to upgrade this stuff. Like, upgrade the stuff, especially if you're going to be like the best laser jammer. Some of these things are just kind of annoying, you know? And again, coming back to the beginning of my rant, I'm glad to see that they're focusing on jamming, and I hope that they make some improvements as far as how the Dragon Eye stuff is being handled here. So we have at least the option of going like, you know, full jamming or maybe like backing down some of the stuff if needed to avoid some of the jam codes. Like, I'm glad this kind of stuff is available, but like, give us the option to do that. Why not put a headphone jack in the CPU? Why not put Bluetooth in the CPU itself? Why not improve the UI of the app to like just make it like everything else that runs nowadays, you know? Is ALP just kind of like resting on its laurels because they're like, well, we're the best laser jammer, and if you want Bluetooth, well, you gotta buy the Bluetooth module. You want the speaker so you can hear the alerts better and get the voice announcements. We'll spend extra for the hi-fi module, and I'm like, fine, but like the competition at this point is really starting to catch up. We're seeing performance is also good here from the competition. Performance is catching up. It doesn't seem like it's currently the case the way that it used to be, where it's like if you want a good jammer, you have to go with the ALP. Again, there are still some benefits here to the ALP. I still like it as like the best standalone laser jammer, but there's improvements to be made here too. Just because it's the best doesn't mean that they should just sit around and like do nothing and be like, great, we're the best, just buy our thing. Like, I hope that there's more improvements that they're working on behind the scenes. There could be a next generation system. They could be working on new heads. They could be working on new CPUs. And BRD's even hinted at the fact that like the DSP improvements for hardware 6 could also be utilized in future versions of the AntiLaser products as well. But who knows when that's going to be? Is that 5 years from now? Is it 2 years? Is it 10? Like, I don't know when it is, right? But like, great. At least the stuff that's being released now could also be used in future versions as well. But like, what about the stuff that we have today? This has been around for years, and we're going 5-6 years between CPU upgrades. Like, give us some modernization here, you know? And again, I say this as somebody who's used the ALP since it's come out, who I run it on my car as like my default jammer, who has had saves from it, who's really enjoyed it, who recommends it for a long time. But like, competition is heating up. It's 2024. Make some additional upgrades. Like, I don't think that's unreasonable to ask, you know? So anyways, I guess that's my rant here on hardware 6. Yay, there's some upgrades, but there's, I think, a missed opportunity for ALP to really upgrade their CPU and add some additional modernizations and improvements that I'm seeing from the competition that other people are doing that I think would be really beneficial to the customers, to me, to you guys, you know? So that's my thoughts here on hardware 6. Yes, there's some improvements. Great, cool, but there's a ton of stuff that I feel like was a missed opportunity. Anyways, yeah, I'm just gonna end it here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later. Bye.